All right. Well, whenever you guys are ready to rock, we can roll.
Audio is balanced. Tea is going to be sipped. You're right.
Not exaggerated at all.
No,
Not
that's just
exaggerated
how
in
you
the
sip
slightest.
tea. I'm sorry you feel that way. It's just
Was there another
literally
China
how
mug?
you sip tea.
Is this going to be an intro this week as well?
No! Done with you making fun of me and my tea sipping.
It's okay. Better than not having tea.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 11 of Tower Dive. My name is TJ, joined this week by DTwo, the head writer of SamuraiGamers.com.
What's up, TJ?
Not much. I also somehow dragged in Paul InVerum Todkill, the Shoutcaster of Valor Series, and you shoutcast like everything.
Hello. I have shoutcasted a few things, yes.
He shoutcasts multiple things. Number one amongst them, in my heart, though, is of course Valor Series, which he's been a part of since Season 1. And I'd like to start off by talking about that, InVerum, because we've been doing that together. It's been a bonding experience.
It's been a whole lot of fun. I have very much enjoyed bringing you onto the show. Obviously, Sweet J, who's been there since Season 1 as well, was traditionally our analyst. But you guys have two very different takes on the same kind of, I guess, role on the desk, and it's really cool to see how both of you are able to put your own completely unique spins on things, which is great because I love the contrast. And then you also get to do play-by-play, which is pretty sick, so that's a lot of fun too. And we're obviously really glad you're on board because it's it's good to have more people, and obviously caster school, up and coming talent, blah blah blah. And then of course casting World Cup is kind of sick, so it's been a lot of fun.
I got to pet a kangaroo, so 10 out of 10. I wanted to take a moment to kind of go back over what we've accomplished so far, though, because we are about a quarter of the way through the season, and we'll look into the standings later on. But what is your vibe? What is your general feelings about the production side of things, about the experience of Valor Series thus far in Season 2?
Oh boy. Well, a lot of people might not know, but I also actually work as a producer on the show. So I work to produce a lot of the content that you guys see additionally, whether it be on YouTube or whether it be within the show. So whether it be the recaps or regional rivals, that kind of stuff. And I think the biggest difference this year is the fact that we are getting to know these teams so much better because it's the same 6 teams for the whole time. And I think from just a format standpoint, it makes for such a better, compelling experience because we get to watch these teams grow. Like, Bubble Team came in week 1 and we didn't, we thought they were going to be so great. We had such big expectations, and then they underperformed chronically. And now they're stabilizing. Now they're recovering. Now they're up towards the top of the standings. And we would never have gotten that same growth if we didn't have this format.
Yeah, and I've really enjoyed getting to see that evolution too, because I feel like the longer we go on with this format, be there another season, or just within this Valor Series to AIC cycle, we're just going to get these really cool story arcs, and we didn't really have that. We were working on it for a WC, the Arena of Valor World Cup, last time, and there were many teams that we just hadn't seen play each other, or hadn't seen enough games on. And I think that it's very important, whenever you're doing esports of any kind, to make it first and foremost about the players.
I agree. I think it's one of those, because we have so many great personalities in the league, like especially if you look towards EU, there's so many fantastic personalities there who I hope I'm going to make a very concerted effort to try and get more interviews and try and talk to those players and so you learn who these people are beyond just a name on a screen. And I think what's amazing when you tie in the fact that you look at EU and LATAM particularly, the field is so close. Like I was looking at, LATAM even this past weekend, the idea that the lowest seeded team can almost take games off one of the highest ranking teams. And our other producer, Perry, made a very interesting point. He's like, well, yeah, they're the top 6 teams of over 100 teams. And that alone makes you realize it's like, wait a second, yeah, like these really are, especially in Latin America, the cream of the crop.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let's talk to DTwo though, because he's been checking out some of the leagues other than Valor Series, and they have been ongoing. RPL and GCS are continuing to develop. Do you have any thoughts? We were talking a ton about the format. It is kind of a shift towards the RPL GCS format that we've done here in Valor Series. Do you think that's good? Do you think that's a good standardization?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's a good idea because in Valor Series Season 1, you saw a team just completely running away with the standings, and it really wasn't compelling after a certain point. It's like, okay, we know which teams are going to get in. The only question is maybe there's some drama with 4th and 5th, but now with every single week, teams playing each other, and there's no way to run away with points by winning a weekly tournament, it makes it a lot better, and the story is more compelling, especially because, like Paul mentioned, it's just so hard once you fall out of the league to get back in and then get back to that same place where you're challenging. Whereas if you're constantly in the league and just be able to focus on one strategy, one opponent, and hone your play style overall, then that allows you to climb back into the league, and you see much more parity, I feel, and because the teams are that close.
You've been reviewing some of those VODs. Can you talk to me about production value versus Valor Series? What is RPL GCS doing better? Where can they improve versus Valor Series? Where's that at?
I think that RPL has the best production value, which is surprising considering you would guess that GCS does, since they have probably the best teams in the world in their league. But RPL, they essentially just copied a lot of what worked for other leagues, and the production is just off the charts, and it's absolutely amazing to see just everything, the little details from the way they set up the draft, having these little holograms on the screen when the characters come up, to
wait, they have holograms?
You didn't notice yesterday? Oh my goodness. You came on the cast yesterday.
Producer Paul, I need holograms, thank you.
Trust me, if we could afford it, we would. I also love the fact that you're casting with Braun, D2. That's great. He's been a friend of mine for years. He came from. He was the one. Fun fact: the source is the guy who actually got me into AOV. We were playing it behind the scenes when we were working on Heroes of the Dorm, so we were playing it in between games.
Get those 20-minute games in maximum.
That's literally it. Yeah. Except back when we started, they were still like 14-minute games. But alas, tower changes.
Yeah. Well. I mean, if you're good enough, you can end pretty quickly. By the way, we had a. No, I'm just saying. In general, the people. That wasn't targeted at any particular person. By the way, between the number 1 and number 2 teams in this Monday, or this week's Monday, I can't English. Bizarre Gaming beat Alpha Red in 7 minutes and 40 seconds. They beat the number 1 team in the league in 7 minutes 40 seconds. I was flabbergasted. My gas was flabbered.
That just I haven't seen that game, so I know we're tangenting slightly, but was that just an outdraft? Because that sounds like a game that was lost in draft.
It was a slight outdraft. I think
Alpha Red didn't have a terrible draft.
The major thing I think for these drafts is teams aren't quite considering what their opponents are running when they're building their draft. And you get into these situations where they've drafted a composition that may very well be their plan and may very well be fine on paper, but into what their opponents have very obviously been building towards, it does not work.
Yeah. Well, we actually saw the exact opposite yesterday, where Bizarre, and we're getting on like a third tangent, but Bizarre actually responded too hardly to what ITCD Baking was doing, and then at the end of their draft, they had like nothing. There's a blob of characters.
Yeah, we had one of those in Valor Series, and I called it the Franken draft because I call it's a hard overcorrect. It's where you see what your enemy's doing halfway through, and then you go to adjust your build on the fly, and then you just end up with a pile of mush that doesn't work together because you tried too hard to counterplay, and it almost invariably fails.
I like Franken draft because just like Frankenstein, the horrible creation wants to die, and that checks out.
That's also the right time of year for it.
Going back to the first tangent, the question that you asked, Paul. So it was a slight win in the draft, but it was a complete out rotation, and they just dominated so quickly. And then they got a convincing kill where in the what is supposed to be the beginning of the mid game, and then they just went right straight to core and won the game because they had waves. So one of those games. And then Alpha Red decided that because they had just lost convincingly to Bizarre and 90 City Bacon, who by the way is the AWC finalist team, they're like, well, we're not done sucking enough, so we're going to lose the last place team in the league, which TJU and I casted yesterday.
And that was something. I was amazed to see that. Things are just as spicy in the RPL as they are in the Valor Series, and that's fun to see because so many regions are pretty turbulent right now.
One last thing before I move on, the GCS was insane as well, as like chronically underachieving SMG this season actually defeated J-Team, and that's J-Team's first series loss of the season, and they were legit crying on stage afterward for a good 5 minutes. It was that emotional for them. And the other surprise was winless Monster Shield defeated Team 1, who at the time was in the playoff picture. So 2 huge upsets in the GCS, and that was really fun to be able to cast.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that first one particularly is, chronically underperforming is definitely the name of that one.
Well, the funny thing is J-Team's only game losses on the season and series loss have been to SMG. Every single other team they've beaten 2-0.
We would call that a kryptonite team in any other game.
Absolutely.
I feel like kryptonite's an especially good term for AOV, given that we have the DC license.
Yeah, we can officially use that, can't we?
We should just be deploying that all the time.
Yeah, we should.
There is no stable league. Upsets everywhere. But one thing I'm not upset in the slightest about is the fact that InVerum casts Arena of Valor. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, that was a segue, how that happened. And I'd like to kind of get into that. We didn't really talk about it with any of our other guests, but with you in particular, I find it fascinating because you are an incredibly accomplished shoutcaster, and you're here.
It's really interesting, the whole story, actually, because so for those who don't know sort of where I started in esports, I attended my first esports event in 2008. I've been involved in esports since before esports was esports. I was a professional player. I competed at a very high level in multiple titles. And then in university, I sort of took a backseat to esports. I went to school, got a degree. And in my final year of university, let's just say I had too much free time on my hands. And I got back into Heroes of the Storm. I played that at a high competitive level. And when I just couldn't do it anymore with school, I said, okay, I'll try casting. So I got into casting Heroes and ended up doing that at a professional level, casting the largest collegiate esports event of all time, which is an event called Heroes of the Dorm, which, for those who don't know, the winning team wins their college scholarship or college tuition forever. If you're in year one of a 4-year degree, they will pay your outrageous American tuition of like $100,000 or something. It's like a lot of money. And the second year around working on that, I worked with The Source, Braun The Source Mitchell, who, if you aren't familiar with him, you should be, because he's one of the most knowledgeable guys in esports, period. He is one of the smartest guys I've ever met working in esports, having like cross-game knowledge. It's incredible. And he was like, dude, you should like play this game. Me and Halora and the other caster, they're playing it in the office. I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, I think they're doing some like esports stuff for that. You should message Chris Negrin over at ESL. And I was like, okay. And then like kind of never actually thinking anything. We were like, oh yeah, we should totally like apply to cast that. That'd be kind of fun. And then ESL actually announced the first Valor Series. And we're like, oh, we maybe actually should do that. So I sent over a reel to ESL, not really thinking much of it at the time. And literally one of those, like, the days worked out where I could do both. And it was one of those weird situations where like, yeah, we just kind of want you to come do this. And, you know, having worked on a couple different, having worked on some different games and worked on some different stuff over the years, it was a lot of fun coming into a sort of the ground floor of an esport. Because this is really the first time we'd done anything major for AOV in North America. So it was a lot of fun because I wish I'd been able to do that in Heroes, sort of get in at the start. So that was a really cool opportunity.
Hearing you talk about contacting Chris Negrin is funny because I used to cast with him. His tag is Kobayashi Maru. We used to cast with him in Hearthstone. So, small world.
Dude, it is such a small world, man. When you get to a certain point in esports, everybody knows everybody, and it's really funny. Because like people you think have no connection are like replying to their like comment threads on Twitter. I'm like, how do you know this person? What? Especially
How
when the
did
person
you
is
know?
Jump, because Jump knows everybody.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you know this? I don't understand. It's fun.
Why is he interviewing Barack Obama? What's going on right now?
Look, man, give Jump a year. I'm just saying.
So, if you've come into the game, what was one of the major shifts? Because I know Heroes of the Storm is a MOBA, but it is a pretty different MOBA. How did that work out coming into AOV? Was there anything that was really surprising to you?
Well, I think so. For context, I started in League, and then I went to Dota, and I have like 1,300 hours
You've
in
done
Dota.
all of them.
And then I went to I've done all of them. So I've done stuff in every single MOBA. So it's really interesting because you find moments in these games where you're not quite sure where things are going, but my brain luckily has like an endless supply of just things that are true in every MOBA, so that I can just word vomit out the correct "this is true in MOBAs" statement, which is really handy. But the thing I noticed about AOV was that my first impression was that all 10 people run in, everybody presses all their buttons, everybody presses their alts, and you hope you're the team with somebody left at the end. That was my impression first watching AOV. But what I found watching it a little bit longer was the fact that support players in AOV are so much more important than in a lot of other games because of the way like talents work and the way like the heal ability as a whole is game breaking. It's so good if used correctly. And there's so many small little moments like that I think you'd miss in a lot of other games. And that way it reminds me, I know it's more akin to League, but it reminds me of Dota in a lot of ways because like every single person on your team has big abilities that can break the game or change the game. And I love that because there's some characters and heroes that just feel useless sometimes, which sucks. And I love the fact that in AOV at any given point, any character can win the game for their team.
Except two. Sorry.
I feel like Arena of Valor team fights are more mechanically intense than many games because of the super low TTK. That like every single character typically has a stun, and all of those individual stuns could win the fight. So there's like way more emphasis put on individual abilities than I feel are the case in other MOBAs.
Yeah, and I kind of found that a little bit too coming from Dota, where you can one-shot people. Like, you get, like a Phantom Assassin full crit build in Dota, and you walk up to a support, and you can one-shot them. And obviously, it's a slightly different, it's an hour into a game versus 20 minutes into a game, but having that similarity, AOV felt it's everything that I loved about every MOBA that I've ever played, which was great. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good contrast for me because you said you started in League of Legends around 2008. I was starting to play Mario Kart, and that was kind of my first video game that I played. So
I started in Gears of War in 2008 competitively, so slightly different.
Hey,
it was a very interesting experience as a child, as like a 14-year-old. Having grown men screaming at you across a bank of televisions in a dark room in Toronto. It was an experience.
You played competitive at age 14?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was like old school game battles ladder, like way back in the day. So it's yeah, that's so. And then going to Halo and going to Call of Duty 4, and then going a bunch of different games in there as well. Got a taste of that, and then eventually I went PC route, which was obviously not the correct decision because I guess it was mobile. Wait, wrong podcast. Hashtag PC Master Race. Anyway,
if you think about it, phones are just small PCs, so you're fine. You haven't betrayed anything.
Yes,
Phones
we'll
are
go
just
with
PCs
that.
in your pocket. Let's
Personal
move.
computers.
Let's move into some personal game news. I want to talk about Yabaneth because he came out last week, but we didn't see him in competitive play yet. This is going to be the first week of competitive Yabaneth on record. How did you feel about him?
Underwhelmed.
What?
Really?
No, I mean, he's really good in the lane, and nobody laned him well. He did well in the Valor Series in the late game only, and then he lost. So, yeah, underwhelmed.
I thought Nova ran a really good Yabaneth. I think NA didn't know what to do with him, and that was blatantly apparent. But I think EU already has run some good Yabaneth, and obviously the other regions, as you may have heard in the little shriek that just came out of D2. Yabaneth has been very effective in the Asian regions.
I haven't, to be honest, I haven't caught a lot of the Asian games yet this week, so I haven't been able to see how they played with him. But I'm hopefully it's better than the West, because the West was, again,
I don't believe I've seen a Yabaneth lose yet.
Well, and you didn't watch all of Valor Series.
No, I mean in RPL and GCS is what I'm saying. But he's very good in lane because you just don't die unless you have a very bursty hero. But even then, if you just play him correctly and run away at the right time. And in fights, he's a ridiculous secondary initiator as an off tank because his Redwood Rush is nuts, and his Nature's Realm is also nuts. It's just that you can't really be being focused by the entire team while you're doing it. If you're focused by maybe 2 to 3 heroes, you're fine. So you get a little bit of focus onto your main tank, then you jump in, and everyone's like, "What the hell just happened? We're all dead."
I'm going to state 2 things I learned. One of them I guarantee was going to blow Paul's mind because it blew my mind. Did you know Redwood Rush goes through walls?
I feel like I did know that.
God!
Because it doesn't surprise me.
Why am I the only one that didn't know about this?
Go to SamuraiGamers.com. I tested that immediately.
Because it was my favorite part of his kit when I play tested him. Because it adds a complete other dimension. That's like an ability, like that is such a game-changing ability because of how it's used for escapes, which means that he can also and also aggresses.
Yeah.
Because if you can go out and push him, if you can hey, don't mind me, just a little lonely bandit over here. Oh, hello, through a wall, my team's here, you're dead. And it's a joy.
I will say the thing I feel is most broken about Yabaneth is branching out.
Yes.
Because the ability to gather an entire team fight into a 1-pixel space is insane.
See, that's a very common ability in a lot of other games, is the ability to clump enemies, but it's not something that's been explored in Arena of Valor. Only the opposite has been done, which is one of the reasons why I feel like Scud is such a hit-and-miss hero, because his ult does literally the opposite and can, if used incorrectly, really mess up a lot of your allies. Whereas branching out has so many sick potentials for combos. Like, let's bring everybody into, I don't know, an Earth Splitter with a Magnetic Storm or a Chainhammer Cyclone, or you get the idea. And because of that, it's just so much good utility.
I like to combo with myself, personally, just branching out into Redwood Rush. Because if you get 3 heroes, you guarantee you get the Redwood Rush. If you get 2, you're probably there as well, because you've probably been getting stacks. So yeah, just slap them, charge them, use your make a big tree guy with the slowing green stuff around, and they're all dead. So, by the way, speaking of Scud, it's kind of like ETC in Heroes of the Storm, where people just kind of need to get used to him as far as when they have the pushback, because ETC is the exact same thing, and people were saying, if you remember back in the day, people thought ETC was bad for that very reason. Little did they know.
And then he was meta for a year and a half.
Yeah.
We've seen a few Star Scud players use exactly that. I remember Angra in South America was able to hard commit to a fight, use Wild Beast Fury, knock back the pursuers after picking off a target.
Which is excellent, and that's exactly how you should use that ability. You literally use it to set. You usually like the whole purpose of that ability, in my opinion, is to isolate one target and then burst that target. Especially if you can combo it with like, if you can get your DPS on a flank and you just like you go into their back and then knock one of their back lines out, catch them off guard, and then your DPS can finish them. You start that fight in a 5v4. And
Also, the ability itself does 15% of their maximum HP as damage. So the ability itself chunks people as well.
It's good. That's why it's good. You blast the tanks forward. You don't do a chunk of their HP out. It's good. I dig it. I think Scud should see more play, but I think teams are afraid to run him because he is tangentially weak in lane. He can be weak in lane if you don't know how to lane him, and he gets abused easy until he gets a little bit fed, and then he can mess up all of your allies.
Let's talk about things that mess up all of my allies. The choice between Drake and Abyssal Dragon. I want to talk about Drake and his Dragon Energy because we've seen a little bit of a shift fairly consistently towards this Abyssal Dragon, the Enraged Abyssal Dragon, being prioritized over the Dark Slayer and the Drake by extension. Do you think that's something that is just people not yet knowing how to use the Drake, or people generally don't think Dark Slayer has the same efficacy as it used to?
I think at 10 minutes, the early stages of the Enraged Abyssal Dragon, you're better off prioritizing that over the Dark Slayer because you're likely going to get more team fights out in the open because a few towers have fallen down. If you're a team that really needs to take down towers towards the end of the game, you probably go for Dark Slayer. That said, the Dark Slayer healing buff is a little bit underrated. You can still use that to win team fights, but yeah, the Abyssal Dragon is a lot better as far as being able to do that. I should mention right now for for people listening, I've seen this happen so many times. I think I saw it in the Valor Series too. Someone died to the Abyssal Dragon because they didn't realize this. But when you attack the Abyssal Dragon, the first couple of times it attacks, it doesn't do that much damage. But then the third one just chunks you down really hard. And we saw a pro die to Abyssal Dragon for that very reason.
That Lendis, yep, that was awkward.
So many people died to Abyssal and Dark Slayer over the last few weeks. Like,
people forget they're debuffed. Like, people forget, like, they try and start the dragon after they've taken Slayer, and it's like, are you sure?
Well, don't forget the actual Dark Slayer debuff. When it attacks you, it lowers your armor and lowers your attack damage. So you think you're chunking through the Dark Slayer, but your attack's going lower, you're taking more damage. That's why you need a tank to tank the damage for you so that you don't get debuffed when you're attacking it. So that's what it's not just taking attacks to prevent damage on you if you're the damage dealer, like the jungler or the marksman, or both. You also don't want to have your damage lessened as well. So that's why you want to avoid attacks from the Dark Slayer.
But to answer your initial question, TJ, I think that in a lot of times and maybe that's just more personally towards my style, but I generally prefer getting the team fight buff because once you kill a team, if you have any okay macro to speak of and you've been pushing lanes correctly, if you just win the fight, you can win the game. But pushing towers doesn't necessarily mean that you can win the game. At some point, you need to kill them. And which is why I'd almost always rather go for the team fight buff because I would rather just kill their heroes and then kill their towers than try and kill their towers while also getting destroyed and X, Y, and Z. I don't think the Drake, as much as I love the idea that the Drake sits out of range and can poke down towers, I would almost rather it be this big frontline beef, that tanks the tower for you. And then it's like a big boy minion, and that way I can get my marksman in range to burst down the tower. Because you'd always guarantee a tower late game. You'd always guarantee a high ground if that's the way the Drake worked. If the Drake went in tower range and soaked guaranteed 10 tower shots, you'd always get a high ground.
I kind of really feel like the Drake is in a perfect place now, because if you run a full Drake push into a tower, you've got I would say an 80% chance of getting that tower, whereas otherwise you have a 50-50 team fight. So there is a definite advantage to picking it up when you want to take a tower.
But it's not 50-50 if you have the buff, right?
Well, it depends. I have seen a lot of teams wash up underneath high ground towers and just get wiped because they don't take the fight right, or even with the buff, they're just outscaled by good defensive play. I do think the Abyssal buff actually kind of needs to be nerfed. I think it's too strong, and I think if it gets taken down a touch, then the Dark Slayer becomes the more useful thing for taking towers, and the Abyssal no longer becomes a guaranteed game win.
I think there's a bunch of different cool stuff they could do. with Drake. We can harken back to Heroes a little bit here. In one of the Battlegrounds in Heroes, when you complete the objective, it spawns this additional unit in your minion wave, and that buffs all the minions in all 3 waves and pushes them forward, and is a big tanking thing, has this big area of effect buff. And rather than having, though I love the idea of a Summonal Drake, and I think that it requires a ton more skill and how you use it and how you place it, how you move around it. Maybe, there's something to be said of buffing all 3. You get a buff to all 3 lanes. That way your enemy has to choose where do we want it. Then it makes more macro decision making. I think there's a bunch of, and all the fact that they're still willing at this stage in the game to bring in and make these massive changes. Like those were big changes. Like this update was huge. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I still think that I don't love the place the Drake is at. I feel like there's still some ways they could tweak it personally.
I'm pretty much in agreement. I like that they brought it in. I think it could be slightly better. I do like the fact that you can't just collie the wave anymore and be like, oh, we're defended, we're good. You guys can't jump us anymore. So that's very nice.
Yeah.
Let's skim through the Valor Series results recently, because we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to touch vaguely on each region, and if there's one game or 2 games that you guys want to shout out to, now would be the time. Europe, of course, saw a resurgence in Bubble Team and a confident reset for Nova Esports. That's Nova Esports in the lead at 8-2, and Bubble Team following at 7 wins and 5 losses. Latin America was chaotic as ever. Geo Esports, I feel, are at this point established as the kings of the region. They're 8-2. Pain Gaming still following behind, but looking a little bit more mortal here. 8-4 is their record, and they definitely looked shaky. North America, of course, was the final region, and Allegiance are as yet undefeated. The halfway mark of the season, they are 12-0. That's insane.
It's really good. Yeah, finish your thoughts, because I have one or 2 things in LATAM and EU, and then I'm on my thoughts.
I'll go quickly because I have probably the least thoughts, but Allegiance, I feel like they're the best team in all of Valor Series, and I feel like the rest of NA is not even as good as the top teams in EU, so there's that much of a chasm between them.
How do you feel? I have this running thing, and actually, InVerum, you're perfectly positioned to answer this question. Are Nova and the rest of Europe going to be able to challenge Allegiance on a world stage?
No.
Ooh. Hard no.
There are 2 types of ALG that we face. There's ALG when chips are down, and then there's ALG all the rest of the time. And I would say 90% of the ALG that we see is the latter. And we don't even, you want to compare this to Dragon Ball, we barely see them go Super Saiyan, most of the time. They still have 4 more tiers that they can go to. And we saw it during AWC, and we saw it in some other examples when they're like, okay, we need to try. And then it's a flip, a switch you can see flipped. It's instant, and everything about their movements change. And it's really, really funny to see when they go try hard mode. And we saw it very, very briefly in game 1 versus Tribe, when they were down 8 kills, and they went, okay, maybe we should try, and they just rolled that game, and they never looked back. Nova have dropped games. Nova have almost lost games to mid-tier teams. And while I think that's indicative of, as you say, EU as a whole being much greater than NA as a whole, I still think that the 6 months that ALG has been together and the 1,000+ games they've done together is too much to overcome. I think LATAM, I was doing the recaps for all 3 regions today. Latin America has gotten so much better. Oh man, from week 1 to now, it's incredible how much better they've gotten. EU was a bunch of incredibly talented players going toe-to-toe, and it was chaos. And LATAM was a bunch of players who had no connection to each other playing together, and it was chaos, but not for the right reasons. And they have tightened up their gameplay so much, and it makes me very happy.
EU to me is kind of an interesting laboratory experiment, because they've had, like, more than any other region, they've had definite waves of meta evolution over the course of the season. Like, definitely Dead Rabbits came in, broke something, the Spanish teams had their own little twist on how you play AoV, and now it feels like Nova, Bubble Team, and Alliance, the European teams, have kind of stabilized and sorted things out.
I agree. I feel like the whole Death Ball initiative was this very cool little idea, and then teams learned how to deal with it, and it was like, okay, that's fun. We can table the all in on this now. And that little shock to the meta system, I think, was really healthy because it forced teams to look at different alternatives. But I think as a whole, the meta is in the best spot we've ever seen it, and we touched on this on broadcast. But there are more strong, viable heroes now than there have ever been, and I love it.
Well,
and not only that, but a ton of different styles of play that you can do. You can run Death Ball, you can run Marksman Jungler, you can run Assassin Jungler with Marksman side lane, you can run Double Marksman, you can especially since I've seen all three regions, well, 3 regions, I've seen multiple play styles from RPL, GCS, from Valor Series, that there's so many things that are possible, and that just makes me want to look at AIC even more because of the clashing styles that we'll see there.
I'm glad you brought it up because, of course, Valor Series is the qualifier for AIC, and only one of those AIC qualifiers regionally has completed so far. That's the Valor Cup Season 3, which is the qualifier for the MSP region. Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines. They were represented, I believe, Philippines team won Clutch Guild Black last season, but they had travel issues, and it was actually the Singapore team, Tomago, that made it to the World Cup in their stead. They did decently there, and clearly it helped them because they did just clean sweep the finals of Season 3 and qualified for the AIC as the first team qualified for AIC 2018.
I definitely feel that every team that played in AWC is going to have a massive advantage going into it, because playing on that level of stage and competing against, I want to call it the meat grinder, that was both those group stages and finals, will make any team better. So they were able to bring back everything they learned. We see it in Tribe Gaming between KPL and AWC and everything that happened with that. So you see Tribe getting that from KPL, you see ALG getting it from AWC. All the exposure to these Asian regions, particularly for us in the West, I think just improved everything that we've seen here.
Should we talk about PvP, since the 3 teams?
I didn't even have it there, but yeah, why don't you lead into that?
So the 3 teams that actually competed in the Valor Cup finals, from Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines. There's also a wild card from the Philippines as well. But the 3 teams that won the respective countries actually go to PvP. That was their qualifier for that as well, which will happen in 2 days. I guess 3 days if you were over there. But the other teams that were invited were Flipside, who didn't qualify for the Valor Series, and Monster Shield, who is currently in last place in GCS. And like I mentioned earlier, they actually scored an upset, so they're playing pretty decently. The other teams are Alpha X from Thailand, and they had a pretty massive qualifying tournament where the winner got, I think, $18,000 just to qualify. And then XD Gaming, my favorite name from India, is the last qualifier there.
This is, of course, PvP Esports. The event's happening in Singapore this upcoming weekend, and most of the AOV talent I know are attending it. Everyone, Opal, Riku from the Philippines, Rip from the World Cup, and Sui is ditching the Valor Series, abandoning his responsibilities to cast the event. And I wish them all the best of luck, and I'm really, really sad I can't be there.
I'm actually very confused as to who I would pick to win this, because based on regions it should be Taiwan and Thailand, but these are teams that are not at the top of their respective regions. Tamago is the one team that went to the AWC, so I think it's either going to be Monster Shield, Alpha X from Thailand, or Tamago, despite the fact that Monster Shield and Alpha X are, again, not at the top.
Well, let's.
I vote that it's no one that speaks English, because.
Are you that down on Flipside?
I didn't know they were still a team until just now.
Well, Maxbox Gaming probably speaks English from Philippines too, so that's a double bird. Oh, India as well. That's a triple bird.
What is the match this upcoming week in the Valor Series?
I'm going to give you a preview on regional rivals because there isn't one match. We couldn't pick one game, but now we're looking towards the fight for fourth place. So the two teams in Europe that we're watching for are Alliance and Existence. Both of them are currently tied, and both of them are going up against Nova and Bubble Team. If one of them can take a game off of either of those two teams or more, they will put themselves in a big advantage going into that fourth place spot. That's what we're going to watch for.
My shout-out match is absolutely Existence versus Bubble Team. Existence are a Spanish team that kind of needs to prove that they weren't just flaring up with the rest of the Spanish meta, and Bubble Team looked super good this last week. They need to prove that they're stabilized and evolved. D2, I'm going to give you the option. Don't just talk to me about Valor Series. Is there anything happening either in Valor Series or abroad that you should tune into?
Well, first of all, you can catch the unofficial English broadcast of the GCS coming up. We're going to be having cast Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Japan time, of course. So that's going to be early morning US time for that. You can also check out the ASL, which is a $180,000 Indonesian league, which I haven't been paying attention to, but that's certainly a big deal, just going to buy the prize pool. And the AOG, which is Arena of Glory, Vietnam's league as well. All of these leagues feed into the AIC and are those qualifiers, so check those out. And of course, like we mentioned earlier, check out the PvP Esports Championship.
It's a lot of things to watch. I'm going to need them injected directly into my brain. And that's kind of a shame, because I was hoping that by watching some of the matches, especially from the GCS, I could get an idea of what I should be building on my characters. If only there was a website that allowed me to know where I should build my characters and what items are really coming into the meta right now.
See, I love how you have this great segue to set up this thing up, but that's actually not what the website does. I love how you have this great, perfect setup, but that's just not quite. So he's being polite. Basically, I'm, along with actually the source, your co-caster, D2, is launching a tool generally aimed towards more of the competitive Arena of Valor player. It's called AOVbuild.com, where it's functionally a way for you to min-max the crap out of your builds. Functionally, what it allows you to do is select your heroes, select a build, select the level, and we actually tell you in real math numbers, real people numbers, how much damage you're doing, what your magic resist is, what your armor is, you know, all this different, every single number associated with your character. You can select your arcana, you can play with that, you can fiddle with all of it, and then once you have all that, you can compare it to other builds. Whether it be default builds in the game, whether it be other builds that you save, you can compare it at different levels, different points in the game. So you say, okay, I'm level 4, should I get this item first, or should I get this item for my first team fight, that first dragon fight? What should I be building first, or at level 10, or etc. Basically, what this allows you to do is find your power spikes in game, compare them to different stuff, or just strictly say, wow, this build is actually just better. If I go this item instead, I'm going to have way more of this. The long-term goal is to add different features which allow you to calculate like TCKs, so you can put yourself in lane versus like another hero. So let's say like Marja going up against Omen, you can actually calculate how many abilities and auto attacks it's going to take to kill that person in lane. So you can literally just do the straight math on that. So we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff, which obviously for maybe the average player isn't super required. We're going to have pros submit builds and stuff like that, so you can compare your builds to the pros. But, you know, for the higher level community, it's going to be hopefully a very cool tool for them.
You showed me this a little bit earlier, so spoiler, but I really, really am looking forward to it, because there are like a few builds I see on a regular basis at the pro level that I just think are so stupid.
Fun fact, that's how this started. Braun, the source Mitchell, was watching the stream and said, why are they building Rank Breaker over Muramasa here? And he sat and he did the math. And he said, nope, if they're before level whatever, it makes sense. But after that level, 100% of the time, they should take Muramasa. And that's how AOVbuild.com was born. Was him getting pissed off and texting me during the broadcast.
He hates Rank Breaker.
He hates it. Oh my God. He should be your next guest. Bring him on just to talk about how much he loves Rank Breaker.
He's gone off the deep end the other way, I think. You do get movement speed between the lanes, which is
you do, which is useful.
Yeah,
all 10% of it.
My personal pet peeve is people building Soaring Aura on Jinnar because we finally get to use that item. It's like, no, actually, just build Spoopy's Mask. It's just better. Sorry.
Some people have started to learn that, but I saw one of those earlier on the Jinnar build, and I said, "Yay!" I think it was Shurko actually. I'm like, "Thank God he didn't build all the Soaring Aura." Woohoo! Yay! It was good.
Very good.
Of course, we also have sgaov.com if you'd like a more standard news site. That's the hotline to the Samurai Gamers Arena of Valor page, for which D2 is the head writer. You can find him on Twitter at D2HS and all of his pirate broadcasts at twitch.tv/D2HS. InVerum, you join me weekly on the Valor Series, which is available both in-app and at facebook.com/Arena of Valor. And you can get all the updates and his sick little selfies over at InVerum Gaming on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
What was that? Oh, yeah. That stopped me dead in my tracks.
Yeah, TJ just stopped in his tracks. He's like,
That was a response to your... Keep going. Keep going.
I don't know that I can.
That's fine. It's the end of the show.
I take some selfies too sometimes, mostly of my cat at Esports TJ on Twitter.
Adorable. Esports TJ. Go look at his cat. It's adorable and fluffy.
She's hopelessly stupid.
And messes with the green screen, apparently.
She has knocked down my green screen on stream twice. So, you know. InVerum, I did this to rest last week, to surprisingly good results. I'm going to hand it to you now, but since you're already an experienced broadcaster, I want you to finish out this show as I would. Give me your best TJ impression closing the show.
And that's fine. We're going to do this here. You're more Irish than you normally are. Thank you all so much for joining us once again here for Tower Dive. We will see you. I don't know why you're so Irish, but you are. We will see you next time. This is TJ. That's D2. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your tea.
I found a pot of gold underneath the rainbow.
Fuck, I could have gone way more Irish, man. I could have gone so much more Irish.
Just lean into the Irish.